Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Every Rocky Ever, a Colorado Rockies podcast, part of the Rocky Mountain Rooftop Network, proud member of the Fans First Sports Network. I'm your host, Skyler Timmons, and joined always here by my brother, who's enjoying a snow day himself as we record. It's my brother, Dustin.
Hello. Trying to stay warm.
It's, I guess people up in Denver and on the other side of the mountains are getting a lot more because it is a nice and warm, like 20 some odd degrees here in the San Luis Valley. So we're doing okay. Wind hasn't picked up yet, so we're good. But, anywho's, we're not here to talk about the weather. We're here to talk about the Rockies and every Rocky ever. And this one, I think, is kind of paramount. It kind of fits into a more modern era of Rockies baseball, specifically revolving around 2018. Rockies have spent big on free agents before, usually position players. They're hesitant about starting pitchers. That'll be another episode coming soon that we'll record. But about 2018, the brain surgeon himself, Jeff Bridich, decides, hey, we got a competitive team here. 2017, we went to the playoffs. It was our bullpen that lost us the wild card game. Pat Neshek gave up a triple to Archie Bradley. All that stuff. But figuring they wanted to compete some more, what do, Dustin?
They invest in the Super Pen.
Yes, the Super Bullpen. They spent big, like blew people out of the water. Very surprising. Drop $106 million on 3 pitchers. Jake McGee, who had already been with the team, so they re-signed him. Bryan Shaw, who had been with the Cleveland Indians at the time. And probably the most surprising one was the signing of Wade Davis, the closing pitcher extraordinaire for the Tampa Bay. Had been with the Rays, became a closer with the Kansas City Royals, and coming off a season with the Cubs there in 2017. Drop all this money into these 3 guys, and as we will talk throughout this, didn't really pan out.
The only 1 year of the Wade Davis was good. Jake McGee was...
he had a good year in there when he first came over.
Yeah, and then I have nothing positive to say about Bryan Shaw. Nothing.
Yeah, it's one of those things where we were talking about this before we recorded. It was cool that they spent money. It's cool when the Rockies show, hey, they can spend money. Problem is, they don't really spend it, I guess, wisely. They don't allocate it in the right places, or they don't spend on the right type of players.
Yeah, and especially when you saw what pieces left the Rockies at that time, and then they brought these guys in. You see, man, they could have reinvested that money into this guy, like an Adam Ottavino that went on to play for the Yankees and really did well. But we were stuck with, this huge. They were taking up, those 3 guys were taking up a quarter of the salary. Yeah. The whole team salary.
Yeah, and like Wade Davis, at the time, it was the highest, I think, AAV salary for a relief pitcher. I think it beat out Aroldis Chapman. It's since been beat, but at the time, that was the highest contract of that type for that type of player. But, and as we'll see, none of these guys finished their contract. That's what tells you how good these contracts went for the Rockies. Is none of them finished. I think they were all signed for about 3 years. None of them finished out their contracts in a Rockies uniform. So, not too good. It was cool that they spent money. And how could they have reallocated that resources even beyond 2018? Maybe they could have reinvested even more into DJ LeMahieu after 2018. There's some money there and beyond. But instead, it just kind of part of all this stuff where it's just mismanagement of their money and roster got them into all kinds of messes. But so we'll go ahead and break down these three guys. But starting here, we'll start with one Jake McGee, the left-handed reliever in the bullpen, and take it away, Dustin.
All right, Jake McGee, number 51. He came over to the Rockies in the trade for Tampa Bay Rays with their Herman Marquez. But Jake McGee is from San Jose, California. He was drafted by the Rays in the 2004 draft out of high school. He grew up in Nevada, actually, and made it over to the Rockies. He was with Colorado from the 2016 season into the 2019 season. And, just a lefty reliever. He was a closer for the Rays before heading over to the Rockies. And, he kind of bounced around just in that bullpen area for him. Battled some injuries throughout his career. It seems like he was never just fully healthy. Mm-hmm. But once he was done with the Rockies, they said, "You know what, buddy? We're going to let you go." Mm-hmm. So he was released by the Rockies in July of 2020. Signs on with the Dodgers, becomes the World Series champ. Asterisk next to that. And then bounced around to the Giants, Brewers, Nationals, and I'm pretty sure he's out of baseball now.
Yeah, that's what it looks like. And I guess I wasn't quite aware of when the trade happened to bring McGee over because, again, I was in Oregon 2016. That ended 2015, 2016. So that first year, but when I come back and I'm back watching Rockies baseball in 2017, that was coincidentally Jake McGee's best year in a Rockies uniform there in 2017. But it was one of those things. Rockies have really struggled having, I guess, lefty relievers, in this more modern era, despite having Bud Black as the manager. They're getting a little bit better now. But those first couple years, 2016, 2018, it'd be like Jake McGee and Chris Russin. And Jake McGee was there in the back end of that bullpen. But I liked Jake McGee at that time in 2017. That was my first impression of him.
Well, that's what I remembered him from the Rays, probably from playing video games. And he had sort of a different lefty. I wouldn't say why he always pitched from the stretch, but it was real top heavy. Mm-hmm. And I remember being being able to push the ball a little bit more. And then with the Rockies, it was just kind of like he would get some strikeouts.
Yeah.
He had 178 strikeouts in 195 innings. But it wasn't like he didn't just blow it past guys like I had always thought that he should.
Mm-hmm.
And then, he had some success as a closer that year. He got a few saves for the Rockies, but then I just remember a lot of it was like try to use him as that left-handed setup guy, and a walk, hit, walk. Mm-hmm. Like that's always what it felt like with Jake McGee, or a wild pitch.
Yeah,
that's what I always thought of.
Yeah, and looking at it, no, it wasn't a huge walk type of guy, but saying they'd come in bunches, I think, and that's what would get him, because a couple walks and then a big hit. And 2016, 2017, 2 decent years there. And then he becomes the free agent, and the Rockies say, we got to re-sign him. We want him back. So then they dole out all that money, the 3-year contract, and 2018 just does not work out. Horrible year, 61 games, had a 6.49 ERA, 2-4 record, 51 in the third innings. Gave up 39 runs in total, 10 home runs, 16 walks, 47 strikeouts. Had a 1.461 whip. That's walks hits per innings pitched. So he was just getting hit a lot, I think. And it was one of those things where he started off good, but then I don't know if it was either him or just the Rockies changed something, or they're just not able to help him continue to develop or continue to improve. They just kind of leave him to his own devices, and it just doesn't work out there in Colorado.
Yeah, and he's Jake McGee. I liked you. You weren't worth that money. And then it was sad because he goes then to our enemies over in Los Angeles, and he all of a sudden looks like an all-star pitcher again. Like, yeah, he goes to the Dodgers and to San Francisco for a couple of years, and he's got a sub-3 ERA, and he's competing, and we're like, what the heck? Where was that at? And then the real Jake McGee showed up again. But for those couple of years, it was kind of like that, just in spurts. It was like, dang, he's got this figured out. And then it was usually like an injury would pop up, and he's back to, oh man, this is him.
Yeah, it just I think that was the big thing, and they saw something because they're released during the summer camp of 2020. He gets released there along with Bryan Shaw, but he's gets that release because he just wasn't getting it done anymore. They were having other guys pop up in that bullpen that were, Tyler Kinley they had acquired. There's a couple others. Daniel Bard was there, and so they kind of like, yeah.
And Scott Oberg.
Yeah, Scott Oberg was around. So you have these guys. Hey, better options than what we'll just eat the rest of this contract and let them go. But because it looks like in 2019 he had started the season with a knee injury, and so 2019 kind of gets off to a rough start. But he still manages to turn in a 4.35 ERA. But he's just giving up a lot of injuries or giving up a lot of home runs, inconsistent. Like you were saying, there'd be good instances. Boom, man, he's lights out. He's figured it out. Then next game, he's giving up 3 home runs and we're down by 10 again, type of thing. So I think we end up having to give him about a $2 million buyout or something. But man, rough go for Jake McGee, and it's not because a good lefty is hard to come by, and one that can, I think, throw a little bit harder. And I think that's when he moved over to the Dodgers. I think that's what he mentioned is they helped him get back to using his fastball, which the Rockies had kind of edged him away from, and he started throwing his fastball more, working off of that instead of his other pitches. He was a fastball first type of pitcher, and the Dodgers helped him, I guess, get back to that where he's throwing it high in the zone and utilizing all his pitches instead of trying to fit into a Rockies mold of throw it down in the zone and make sure they're sinkers and all that stuff. Get ground balls.
Ugh. Just let the dudes cook. Make them let their unique abilities just work for them instead of the Rockies have been in this funk of trying to get all these guys being the same, and it's like right now when we look at visiting teams come in and just dominate the Rockies offense, it's because they're letting dudes go out and do their thing.
Yeah, pitchers are, and I think the Rockies are trying to do that a little bit more in the minors, at least. It doesn't translate necessarily to the big leagues, but they're trying to work with where guys are at and build them from there of what can they do for their tools individualized instead of trying to fit everybody into a mold, which they're doing that in the minors. Needs to make its way up to like Bud Black and company at the big league level. But yeah, 3 years, $27 million for Jake McGee, and they end up just getting 2 years out of him, 2 more years out of him, and then cut him loose. And then he finds success elsewhere, which is pretty common for a Rockies pitcher and player. But in total, in his time with the Rockies, 4.78 ERA, he went 4-11 record, did have 19 saves, 195 and 2/3 innings, gave up 104 earned runs, 112 total, 178 strikeouts, 59 walks, 34 home runs, given up in total. 14 wild pitches. So
see, that's what I was saying.
there's your wild pitches. But yeah, his fielding independent pitching, his FIP was pretty close to his ERA. So either way, he's pretty much about that 4 ERA in Colorado. There was hope. There's another one of those the Rockies loved what they saw initially and then paid too much for what came after, and it just didn't pan out. One of those instances where they're paying a guy for the past when that's not who they are going forward.
Mm-hmm. That sounds very familiar. Sheesh.
But moving on to the next guy, the other guy that signed the exact same contract, 3 years, $27 million, and was released on the exact same day as Jake McGee, was old Bryan Shaw, who's still kicking around in the league. But Bryan Shaw was an interesting one, so we'll throw it over to Dustin.
Well, thankfully, it's not. He's still not kicking around with the Rockies. Bryan Shaw, the right-handed relief pitcher, actually says in his baseball rep a switch hitter. Mm-hmm. So with the Rockies, he wore number 29. He's from California. He was originally drafted in the 2008 draft by the Diamondbacks out of California State University, Long Beach. And he was a name in a couple of big trades, but came over to the Rockies on that free agent contract in 2018 and played the 2 seasons and then was released there in 2020. Then went on to, for his whole career, the Diamondbacks, then with Cleveland, and that's where he made his name as one of the most reliable relievers, the workhorse, which I think was a bad thing in the end for the Rockies.
Yeah.
And went to Seattle, back to Cleveland, and this last year had some time with the Chicago White Sox.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, we can start with that. Talking about that was the intent when the Rockies signed him. Oh, here's a guy who has led the league in games pitched 3 different times before coming to Colorado.
Red flag.
80 games in 2014, 75 in 2016, 79 appearances in 2017. That's about what Jake Bird had this year. And Rockies have had a relief pitcher, pitch 90, I think it was Curtis Leskanic, back in the 90s, had like 92 games in relief. But they bring him over, and he's still a workhorse, 61 games, 2018, 70 games in 2019. But you look at the appearances in 2018, 61 games, 54 innings. So it shows there's not a lot of effectiveness within those innings. Had an ERA just under 6 in 18 and 5.38 in 19. So yeah, he was pitching a lot, but I think, like you're saying, it finally caught up to him, especially in Colorado at altitude and everything. It caught up to him.
Well, he couldn't throw a strike, and when he did throw a strike, he'd just get it hammered every single time. I hate to be so negative, but for me, in the memories of him, I hear Bryan Shaw and I get agitated because he was so not worth it. And he just could not figure as a pitcher, I know, like, give me the ball, and I will never deny taking the ball. But every time that Bud Black called on him, I said, reject this call. Like, no, the phone's not working. Or whoever was in the bullpen, oh, sorry, he's not here right now. Please leave a message. Because he was terrible every single time. And I just critiqued every little thing. His delivery. I said, you can see that pitch from a mile away. You know exactly what's coming, and it's going to be a meatball right over the plate, because if it's not right down the middle, it's going to be that, like, wannabe sweeper a foot outside. And so pitch is a hitter. Okay, I know what's coming. Oh, right down. Pew! Or I'm just going to wait. There's going to be 4 balls, and I'll take a walk. So it was. I'm sorry, but whatever. I bet he's a great guy, and everything. I never say anything bad about them as a person. But when you were wearing purple pinstripes, you were awful.
And some of the old comments here over on Twitter on the Every Rocky Ever on Bryan Shaw's post. There's Shmee at Stop Me Shmee says those numbers, and here I was thinking they were worse. Sorry, Shaw. Yeah, they're still not great, but they're not. They could be worse. They're still pretty bad, but I think they're not as bad as people probably have in their mind, or like you're mentioning, but they're still pretty bad. Mile High Fever says Shuffle. We enjoy the pun. And then Svensenberg says, yeah, we could have skipped this one when I posted it. And also somebody, Nathaniel Sunshine, he said violent super pen flashback intensifies. Yeah, I think what makes it even worse is just when you look at the contract, again, like we were saying, the money spent on him. If it was like a 1 year deal or even just a little 2 year deal that's cheaper, okay, we can stomach that. It's okay. Yeah, he's awful. We don't feel as bad. It doesn't feel as bad. Like, okay, we can eat that contract. But when he gets paid what he was on that big 3-year deal, part of this Super Bullpen, gets hyped up and then does awful, you're like, this was awful. Like, why did we do this?
We're stuck with this guy for 3 years. That was if they would have thrown out the 1 year contract, maybe 2, or done the 1 year and then seen
with an option thing.
Yeah, I'd go for that. But when they automatic out of nowhere, boom, 3 years. Jake McGee, we've already had you for a couple. Here's 3 more. It's like, no, it just didn't work, especially right out of the gate. Bryan Shaw was not good.
Yeah. Because like with McGee, we had some history here in a Rockies uniform. He's been good. But Bryan Shaw, he was good in Cleveland, workhorse. Let's bring him over. He can do that for us. And no, he couldn't.
Yeah, and it's a whole different thing about evaluating. I'd like to go into see what their thought process is and check. How do they? You play half your games at Coors Field. How are they judging? How are they evaluating how you're anticipating how you're going to perform at Coors Field?
Yeah.
And I don't know how much experience he had, with Arizona and with Cleveland at Coors Field, if they had any sampling of that. And then I think it's so hard, especially with Bryan Shaw, because he wasn't a straight over the top. He was kind of that 3/4, almost sidearm. And, does that play at Coors Field at the altitude? Did he have he did not have the same movement and sink on his ball that made him successful in Cleveland.
Mm-hmm.
And that was just one of the things. He just could not stay around the zone consistently.
Mm-hmm. And the more also, it's like not all on Shaw, because you look how many more Rockies pitchers, it's like a symptom. He's just a symptom of the disease. And how many other pitchers do we see? Because I think initially, like with a lot of these bullpen guys, it's like, hey, like, okay, this move's okay. Well, hopefully it can pan out, because the intent is right. Yeah, you need a workhorse in that bullpen, especially in Colorado, a guy that can go out there and be effective. And he wasn't. And I'm just trying to look up his time in Colorado, or just at Coors Field itself in his career. So it's not just his time as a Rocky, but show ballparks. And we'll look here. What was he at? Coors Field, made 83 appearances at Coors Field in his career. So this is through 2023. He has 83 games at Coors Field, a 4.66 ERA. So that's all time. So not terrible, but then
Not
I'd have to look at
terrible,
his
but
I'd have to look at his 2 years in Colorado, which I probably can find. 2018. Yeah, just ugh. What I liked too is after he was released, he goes on to the Mariners and is just awful. But in an interview with them afterward, he was basically like, I couldn't pitch at altitude. Like, place is awful. I couldn't pitch there. I didn't want to pitch there, type of thing. So a lot of it was blaming altitude and stuff, which plays a factor. But we did. The thing I remember too is after he leaves and he comes into a game ever since, people are just like, man, I hope he gets lit up. Because they're
yes.
just so bitter. Oh, that's funny. But then he goes on and has that good year in Cleveland last year in 2022.
2021.
Yeah, 2021 had a good year in Cleveland.
Where he again leads the league with appearances.
Mm-hmm. Yeesh. Yeah, 2018 at Coors Field, a 6.93 ERA in 30 games pitched.
Ugh.
Yeesh. 1350 at Dodger Stadium in 2 games. He was really good in Arizona, though. 1.93 in 4 games. Only 4 innings pitched. There you go. Yeah, just awful. But that's what I remember is after he leaves and he's in Seattle talking to reporters or something, he's like, yeah, altitude. Like, it got me. I hate that place. Just that kind of message he was sending out.
Dude, if I was the PA announcer, the sound guy at Coors Field, and anytime he showed up, I'd take that sound bite and put it up like in his introduction as he walks out to the mound. or the Rockies, very small chance that they would light him up and put a crooked number up. But as he walks into the dugout, go ahead and play that. I hate it here. The altitude.
Yeah. So here's what he said. This is from the Denver Post, and Patrick Saunders gets this quote from the Seattle Times. He says, I got there and sliders didn't work. It didn't matter what we did. We tried to tinker with it. We tried to change it. We tried to do different stuff, and it just basically fell by the wayside. So basically, I became a cutter primary pitcher with kind of a little cement mixer slider that didn't really go in, really didn't do anything. I think that attributed a lot to the adverse results that I had. Stemming from that, we tried to do some different things to create that movement on the slider and create different stuff in the mechanical side, which then kind of just messed with everything a little bit and just kind of snowballed there. So like there's some merit to like what he's saying where the Rockies just start tinkering. I think that's the problem. They start tinkering with stuff. You got to change everything, which then he's pitched a certain way his whole life, been effective, and then they start trying to tinker and change things that aren't necessarily for the better. Like if don't mess with with the pitches he has, like just introduce a new one. Like, hey, try throwing this pitch in along with everything else. Try to develop this pitch. Just didn't pan out. Looked like a shell of the pitcher he was in Cleveland. That's what Patrick Saunders says. Awful.
Yeah, that's
because you would think of like tinkering. That's what happened to Kyle Freeland. The Rockies started tinkering with things after 2018. And he's just been downhill ever since. Hasn't been the same pitcher.
Yeah.
And they do that with a lot of guys. Jake McGee, they tinkered with some things, and then he leaves, and the Dodgers go back to what he was, immediately improves. So,
well, that's what I think. Pitchers know what for them and when something's off.
Yeah.
And if the Rockies were up to speed, I think now in 2024. They've got their setup in Arizona about they're trying to get their analytics and the cameras and looking at spin rates and whatnot, but they haven't had that, and so a pitcher trusts themselves more than anything, and if the Rockies would have had that technology technology and stuff to be like, okay, let's analyze it. Here's your tablet. We'll send you the files on what you look like in this performance year versus now. This is what was happening on 0-2 sliders against a right-hander. You're striking them out, and this is what's happening now.
Mm-hmm.
And see, and they can make the adjustment. They can see, because us as the fans, we could see things like, wow, he looks off. Like he does not look comfortable.
Yeah.
We notice these pitches are doing this and that, and we're sitting there from our homes and raising our fists to
armchair
clouds.
GMs.
Yeah, but I really think that these pitchers, they need better tools, especially pitching at altitude. We live in a day and age. You could throw on an Oculus and you should be able to see, oh, this is what it's like at altitude.
Yeah.
You can put you on a CPAP machine or something that's taking away, not giving you enough oxygen. And they could simulate what these things feel like. Mm-hmm. And sadly, Bryan Shaw, I'm sorry for all the hate. You really are a workhorse. To have that rubber arm would be amazing to have again. But that's what he has. He can just go out there, and that's the one thing, like I said, is he was a bulldog. He would get shelled, but he'd give me the ball the next day. All right, I'll go out there. And it's not like he would go out there trying to get lit up.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the one thing and I think that's a big stress too, is signing a big contract like that as a reliever, as a player, and always thinking, I have to live up to this contract no matter what I do. And when things are going terrible, how hard it is to bounce or snap out of it.
Mm-hmm. But we'll see if he keeps playing okay with the White Sox. We'll see if I think he signed a minor league contract with somebody. But one last thing real quick before we move on. I do remember he was a big gamer. And I think I remember on like one of the Rockies, like the club show or whatever, or some of the other show, and he had like the setup in his little locker there at Coors Field, and there's like lift up the thing, and there's like a TV and an Xbox in there, and so he'd just be sitting in there playing Xbox, playing them Fortnites, something like that. Yeah, that's what I remember. Like Bryan Shaw was a gamer, like sitting in there. I just like the little like cubby stool thing they had. He had it altered where he just lift up the lid and boom, there's a TV, there's an Xbox in there. Pop it on, sit there and play video games in his locker.
I can respect that. I just wish he would have done more of that than pitching.
Mm-hmm. But moving on to our last one here. This was the big one, which the ultimate flop of these three deals. It's one Wade Davis.
Oh, Wade Davis. The right-handed pitcher, 6'5". He's a big guy from Florida. Originally drafted in the third round of the 2004 draft by the Tampa Bay Devil Rays. And he played for Tampa Bay, then Kansas City, and was a World Series champion. And then he played for the Cubs for a year, was an all-star, and came over to Colorado on a monumental reliever free agent deal and pitched for the Rockies for, we'll say, 2 years and a wink.
Yeah.
And then was released. And he ended up signing back with Kansas City before he called it a career.
Mm-hmm.
But he was number 71 and had one very decent first year with the Rockies. And then it was all downhill.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is a tough one. Because coming off of 2017, we had Greg Holland as the closer. Really good year. Teammate of Wade Davis in Kansas City. Has a really good year. He leaves in free agency. Rockies don't sign him. Instead, they decide, okay, we're going to go spend big and get probably the best closer on the market in Wade Davis. Which, hey, top free agent at a position and we go out and get him, that's awesome. Unfortunately, he was about 31, 32, and coming off a good, decent stretch with the Cubs there in that season as a free agent. But he signs a 3-year, $52 million contract. Again, I think was a record for a closer or for a reliever or closer, something like that. It was a record of some kind. Getting paid $17 million. But in those 3 seasons, he goes 4-13 with 60 saves and 70 opportunities, had 122 appearances, and had a 6.49 ERA. He had an 8.01 ERA at Coors Field and a 4.22 ERA on the road. So another one of those guys that just couldn't figure out Coors Field.
I don't know how in the world he got 40. I don't know how he got 43 saves in 2018.
Yeah. It's that year where things just worked in 2018. Plus, he had a lot of opportunities because that offense still wasn't that great. Like, it was good enough, but that was that year the Rockies were really good in, like, one-run games. Close games, they were really good. They were doing just enough to win games.
Well, I think part of that was they would go into the 9th inning up by 3 runs, and then he would give up 2 with the bases loaded and get the 3rd out. That's for it always felt like that with Wade Davis. Yeah. I know he set the record at the time with it, and I think he's still the record holder, right? For
I think single season saves for a Rocky.
Yeah, but it just seemed like every single outing, it was never a 1-2-3 close it out.
Yeah, like a 4.13 ERA in 2018. So yeah, 43 saves, but still an ERA over 4.
Yeah, just man.
So it's like you're saying, like, yeah, he's getting all these saves, he's finally closing it out, but it's a little bit of a tightrope act.
Yeah, like every single time.
Yeah, and I think he goes on, they hold him around, and then shoulder injuries popped up there in, I think, 2019, 2020, popped up, and he finally comes back in off the injured list in 2020 in September, because he had started the year with a couple of saves, but then shoulder injuries, and then from there, when he comes back, it just didn't work out. Came back and had a dismal 20.77 ERA over 5 outings in 2020. Like, yeah, we're done. Like, there's nothing left. So they cut him loose.
Dude, he was another one. Like, we brought in Greg Holland on a 1-year deal, and he had a phenomenal season.
I think he was comeback player of the year, all-star, led the league in saves.
And it was one of those things, like, yeah, he was like a salvage project for the Rockies on a 1-year deal, and boom, he just cemented in. But it was one of those, like, yeah, he revamped his value. He's going to go somewhere else now and get a major league contract and make some money. And so the Rockies then, instead of doing that with Wade Davis, they jumped all in and said, this guy's been really good the last 3 years. Let's see if he can duplicate it. And it just wasn't. It's like, again, one of those things. His career, he's playing in Tampa Bay. Pitchers ballpark, Tampa Bay is
paradise with analytics.
Yeah, and pumping out these good pitchers, and then Kansas City in that stretch where they won the World Series, and he had things pretty, figured out there. Had a very solid season with the Cubs, and then we just say, you know what? You have been phenomenal the last 3-4 years. Come on in, buddy. Like, you're going to save us and take us deeper into the playoffs.
And unfortunately, he doesn't get that opportunity. or just they're in 2018, their only year in the playoffs with him. That's the thing. Like, they tried to build after 2017, build for the playoffs, continued success, and they get there in 2018, and then it's just been downhill since. But yeah, it's some here. Bud Black, this is in a Patrick Saunders article as well on the Denver Post, says he was a great presence on our team and a great mentor for a lot of our younger pitchers. He was one of our leaders. The shoulder woes started happening, and he just really couldn't recover totally. It makes sense, and that's what you see with a lot of guys. Is they were a mentor to our guys, which there's value in that, but you also want them like contributing on the field.
Yeah, because that's why you have coaches.
Yeah.
They're there to mentor the guys.
And if your coaches are having trouble connecting with these younger players, get younger coaches. Stop having the grandpa brigade. And there's some guys like Warren Schaefer and a couple of those guys, and Vinny Castilla, who's just generational, can connect with anybody. But Bud Black goes on to say, Davis expressed today his desire to continue on to play. It was a very professional meeting. I don't think any of us envisioned this happening at this juncture, but it did. So it just did not pan out for him. And I think a lot of people will point back to, I think it's a lot of those just getting shelled in like the ninth inning blown saves. And time before, there's like a series in June or something against the Padres in 2019 where the Padres just would not die at the end of a game. They kept coming back in the ninth inning, and he has 2 blown saves in that series. I think it was like a record-setting series too. It was like rookies hitting back-to-back home runs or something like that. Walk-off, or like 3 consecutive games with rookie walk-off hits. Or maybe that was more recent. I don't know. It all blends together. Yeah. Ugh.
Yeah, this super bullpen was just like, it was a vision of things to come. Like, it wasn't going to get good. These were some of the last Jeff Bridich, bonehead signings that, yes, they were with good intentions. But when you look at if you really studied the analytics and the history, they were set up to fail.
Yeah.
No matter what. Especially with the things that the Rockies, the teams that they built around them, it just didn't work. And it's sad because it goes back to the Rockies' history of signing pitchers to long terms, bigger deals, and them not panning out. Like, we'll get into in another episode of our, the super starters that they've signed, trying to save the rotation or solidify the rotation, and they just don't work out. But then if we did some of these guys with the 1 year, the lower, the low risk, and we covered a few episodes ago of Jason Marquis, where it was like, dang, that was a golden one. That, that's one that was a low risk, and we got a lot of reward from him that year. But they haven't been able to find it. And as they try to make, bring up the homegrown guys and then throw in these big names, it still just has not been able to solidify and create an actual super bullpen.
Yeah. And especially I think I'm more willing to spend on starters than a reliever, because reliever is so volatile, as we've seen talked about. Yeah, these guys maybe had one good year, except in Bryan Shaw's case, but then everything else has been kind of bad, and so it's hard to, I guess, evaluate and see the value in how much do we give a reliever. Is Josh Hader really worth as much money as he's looking for on the free agent market? He's a really good pitcher, but is he going to be worth $20 million a year for 5 years? No, I don't think so. No, relievers are so. Not Edwin Jackson. He's probably still getting money somewhere too. But Edwin Diaz for the Mets signed that huge contract. They immediately lose a year of him because he tears an ACL in the WBC. So there's so much risk, I think, in relievers especially because, yeah, they're going to get quite a bit of work, but it's just you never know what you're gonna get from a lot of them. Oh, is he going to be successful? Especially in Colorado. Look at Daniel Bard. He's been good every other year on the
Yeah,
contracts he signed. So 2024, he's due for a good one. It's an even
hopefully,
year,
please, we need it.
but it's tough to value. And so, and the problem is the Rockies will see like things like the Super Bullpen. Oh, we can't spend money because look, it didn't pan out, and giving themselves excuses. Where I think you could spend some money, not this ludicrous amount. Whether it be starters, you can go out and spend on starting pitching. But I think with these guys and a lot of things, it goes back to what are the Rockies doing to help guys be successful? Are they giving them the tools to continue to find success at Coors Field? Why is Wade Davis struggling so much at Coors Field? What do we need to do to remedy that? No, in his preparation and stuff.
Yeah, and we look at it. It's interesting too to see who were the catchers in those seasons.
Yeah.
There's a lot of Tom Murphy, Tony Walters, a little Chris Iannetta, I think, dashed in there. It's like, were those the guys needed at that time behind the plate?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a big thing we don't focus on too is like, are the catchers, how savvy are the catchers with like, noticing things, calling games, working with pitchers? I think that's a big one because I think you look at right now, Elias Diaz. Yeah, I think he's a good catcher, but is he the best catcher to continue helping work with catchers moving forward? Type of thing. There's a lot of factors that go into it.
Yeah, or who the pitching coach is.
Yeah,
I am woohoo. I feel like the only one right now that's been like red flags of who's in the bullpen in these times. I think with them it was still Foster. Well, he was a pitching coach.
Yeah, and
Steve Foster, and I think he really connected with Wade Davis, and he had that that 2018 good season. But then after that, with in the bullpen, who was it and who is it now with the starting pitching?
I think Darren Holmes was still around that area. I think.
Oh, yeah, Darren the Hitman Holmes, so there's a lot of factors in there that the Rockies are still, I think, light years behind everybody else. And I think now it's harder because it feels like back then, like, yeah, you could look at these relievers and bank on them, but it's not like it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
I remember relievers were always like the big names out there because they're just constantly year after year after year putting in good, like Bryan Shaw with Cleveland. He just had year after year after year of sub-3 ERA, and it's like, dang, you can count on this guy. But I don't feel that that's a thing anymore in Major League Baseball.
Mm-hmm.
You can just count on these guys just year after year after year of this reliever has it.
Mm-hmm.
Even you think of our the best guys right now, Daniel Bard, it's good year, terrible year. Pretty good year, terrible year. Diaz with the Mets, super good year. Signs, now he's hurt.
Mm-hmm.
And now he's coming back. And we just see that we don't see these guys like Shaw that just year after year after year stays healthy and produces. And
Mm-hmm.
I think back at the times, the days with Bud Black and the Padres, they were like the reliever factory of guys that just season after season after season were up there. Like, these are the best relievers in the game.
Mm-hmm.
And they were that consistent for years. But I just don't feel that that's a thing anymore in Major League Baseball. And I think that's why these kind of contracts just kill the Rockies in those years. They just they just didn't work out.
Yeah, overpriced type of thing where it could be they were just betting against the Coors tax, which it's self-imposed. But You could play some hardball. Yeah, you don't want to come pitch here, fine, but we're not paying you extra. Well, why you shouldn't have to pay somebody extra to come pitch at any specific ballpark. But that's part of the Rockies' problem is they haven't made it a desirable place to come pitch. But there's so much risk in the bullpen and these kinds of contracts, and Rockies learned the hard way. Okay, yeah, no, don't pay way too much for relief pitching because you never know. Somebody could just pop up out of your bullpen and have a phenomenal year. Scott Oberg almost came out of nowhere, boom. Yeah, and then they reward him with a contract that would have been still a pretty team-friendly contract if he had been able to stay healthy through it.
Well, you look like now Tyler Kinley,
mm-hmm.
Super good season. Then he got hurt, and now we're looking for that bounce back year. Now that he's healthy, and hopefully we have Lucas Gilbreth or another former Tampa Bay Ray that takes up those left-handed reliever spots. Mm-hmm. We have the Rockies' own version of Bryan Shaw in Jake Bird, who just rubber arm, can throw whenever he's called. And then our replacement for Wade Davis is a bounce back year from Daniel Bard.
Yeah. Justin Lawrence is thrown in there.
And there's our super pen.
There you go.
A whole lot cheaper too.
Are you even if you look back through the history of Rockies pitchers, like really good relievers, they weren't anywhere kind of like the caliber of those super bullpen. There were better bullpens in the past. Even when you had like Matt Belisle in there eating up a ton of innings, Houston Street, Rafael Betancourt.
Yeah, Betancourt. That's my dude.
Rex brother.
Oh.
Good stuff. There's that one year there was like the Killer Bees. It was like, what, Belisle, Beimel, Betancourt?
Yeah, Joe Beimel. Oh.
Something like that. There's the Killer Bees bullpen. They had a good year.
Yes.
But really quick, here's some other comments on the original post for Wade Davis. Didn't realize he got 13 losses. I was bummed when he left the Cubs since he was so good, but unfortunately, it was the last good year of his career. Really dominant year. I'll still say 2018 was good. Wasn't great, but it was good.
But closing out 43 Major League ball games, pretty good.
Yeah. Was it $17 million good? No.
No.
Maybe 10. Hey, it's Shmee again. Says absolutely brutal to watch this guy close. And then we get some gifs and people like, boo this man, boo. Get off my screen. You wasted our time. Boo. I was so excited to sign you. I do remember Wade Davis like getting booed. Like Rockies fans like don't really boo a lot of players. They don't boo often.
They should.
But Wade Davis, I remember him getting booed. Like it was one of those times, another blown save thing, and he just heard it from the fans. Man.
Is it bad if I'm one of those? Oh, but before they came out with the pickoff move, like the pickoff attempts, anytime I go to the game and I see somebody pick, I just boo. I hate it's the 9th inning and they're picking. I was booing. I think we were at one of the games, and I was just booing any little thing. Like, come on, just play. That's funny.
Mm-hmm.
Boo this man.
Boo this man. Yeah. Oh, goodness. But thus ended the another. Jeff Bridich probably goes down as the worst GM in Rockies history.
Awful.
Easily
of anybody. Oh,
yeah. Easily one of the worst. Easily the worst in Rockies history because, Dan O'Dowd kind of shifted them into this mediocrity, but he still did build up some things. Bill Schmidt's still building. Bob Gebhardt built the thing, did some good stuff. Dan O'Dowd, Bill Guyvette in his GM row, quote unquote, sitting in the clubhouse. Yeah. That was a mess there, but they didn't do some stuff, and then Jeff Bridich just.
At least like
ruin
Dan O'Dowd still owns up to some of the stuff like on MLB Network. I enjoy listening to him talk about baseball and the business side of things and how that. Me personally, I'm like, okay, yeah, because he talks about it openly. In Colorado, we tried this and this didn't work out, and we learned from like that kind of stuff. But the thing was with Bridich, he just disappeared.
Yeah.
Like even when he was there, it was like, I'm better than all of you, and see ya.
Yeah, it started that era of the Rockies just not talking to the media, like
At
for
all.
press conferences or anything. That needs to be an episode all of its own. But
oh yeah, we'll get GMs and managers and all that.
We'll just talk about the Arenado press conference, which is a doozy of quotes.
Ooh.
But a lesson learned for the Rockies: don't spend huge on bullpen arms, but just know how you can develop them. Anyways, that'll end it here for this edition of Every Rocky Ever. Appreciate everybody always tuning in, joining along, watching on YouTube, listening on your favorite podcast streaming platforms. You can always find us at Every Rocky Ever over on Twitter. Working with friend of the show, Patrick Lyons. I believe he's compiling a list for me of Major League non-roster invitees that didn't go anywhere but played in spring training. He's been compiling a list, and I may get that from him to post guys on there.
Nice. That's what I enjoy seeing the every Rocky or the almost every Rocky ever.
Yes, those are fun ones.
And it pops in shout out to Patrick's always throwing those out there, these random players and stats out there.
Mm-hmm.
But it's fun to remember, oh yeah, I remember that, and I was excited.
That guy could have been a Rocky.
Yeah.
Ryan Howard could have been hitting dingers.
Yeah, those little things is fun.
Mm-hmm. But you can find me at sideline_crowd and writing at purplerow.com, as well as fansfirstsports.com. And you can check out the Affected by Altitude podcast every Monday, new episodes. And you can check out our most recent one with Evan Lang and myself talking about outfield pieces and doing dumb bits at the end of the show. Every time. But you can also find Dustin at Mr. T Spanish over on Twitter. You can find him on TikTok on there too, somewhere kicking cans into trash cans.
Then we got our county cappies. We'll be starting our preseason workouts here pretty soon.
Youth baseball.
Once it stops being so cold.
Mm-hmm. But that'll do it here. Until next time, this has been Every Rocky Ever. I'm Skyler, and that's Dustin. Farewell.
Farewell.